we want to welcome everyone here to Citizen, the food movement. Thank you guys for coming. Awesome. This is one in a series of events that our church is doing called Citizen. It's based on the idea of how do we live as citizens of this world while called to be citizens of God's kingdom. And we've had a few events so far. This is our third Citizen event. Tonight our focus is going to be on something that we all care about very much, the food movement. And so we're going to be experimenting with some creative formats. We're going to have a panel discussion tonight, panel presentation. Very honored to have some panelists here. Brandon Fujii is a food blogger, and he's also the founder of OC Foodlist. So let's welcome him up. Courtney Toya is a registered dietitian, and she also teaches at Cal State Long Beach on sustainable food systems. And let's go ahead and welcome her up. And I'm going to be the third panelist. You don't have to applaud for me, but I'm going to be speaking on the spirituality of food, primarily in the Bible and in our culture. So, thank you. I paid him. You'll get your free cup of coffee later. So let me go ahead and open us up in a word of prayer, and then we'll go ahead and invite Matt up, and he'll explain a little bit of the format of the night. Let's pray. Father, thank you for bringing your people together around the table. We thank you that you have created for your people a community that revolves around food and that can bless them, that you have set before us a world that is full of blessing and of food to explore, but also, Lord, that throughout history you've revealed yourself to your people through the metaphor of food. And so, Lord, wherever we're at tonight, whether we're just enjoy a good meal or we think about the sociological impacts of food or even through this spirituality, we pray that you would speak to each one of us tonight. We just have a great time. And so we lift this night up to you in Jesus' name. Amen. We're going to go ahead and invite Matt up. He's our maitre d' for the evening.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you everyone here, and thank you Facebook Live. So I'm going to be the MC for the night, basically just making sure that the night moves through. This is going to be a little bit of a different feel for Citizen. I think last time we went over suicide and depression. This one is a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more informal. We really want to give this vibe of like a dinner party together. So feel free to chat amongst you. You'll have time where you can do chatting amongst yourselves as well. The way that the night's going to work is that we're going to have a 3-course meal, okay? We're going to start with the past food movement, which is the first course. The second course is the present food movement. And then the third course is the dessert. And we'll go through each of these, and you'll get a little bit of a snack with each of them. With each of these courses, there's going to be a time to hear, where we'll hear from the panelists, a time to taste, when you actually have a time where we can sample some of the foods over there, and then a time to talk, where we can talk amongst ourselves or with the panelists, and then finally a time to pause. So with that, why don't I turn it over and we'll do
OC Foodlist. Course is the appetizer course. We're going to talk about what food has meant to us in the past. You might have heard the old saying from your mom or grandma that when I was young, I used to go 5 miles, walk 5 miles to school in the snow. You can translate that to food as when they were younger, food was a little tasteless and mostly the same much of the week. So be thankful that you live in the now and during the foodie movement when food is creative, unique, entertaining, ever-changing, and most important, delicious. Let's go even further back in our time machine. Throughout history, food was not in abundance. In ancient history, many people starved to death. If you think about that for a moment, starving to death, I mean, in America, 35% of the population is obese or overweight. So it's pretty crazy if you think about that. That means food is more prevalent today and also very good, very delicious. Also, there's no refrigeration. It was hard to keep food from going bad. The main way to keep food was storing, drying, or pickling. Secondly, there was also no way to transport food from one place to the other. There's no refrigerated trucks, boats, planes, or trains. If a crop was wrecked due to weather, war, disease, people starved to death. Okay, let's go a little up in time, maybe to the 1950s. Food was mainly prepared at home. You ate dinner with your family. In the 1950s, the TV dinner was also invented. Later, fast food started catching up, mostly due to the automobile. So fast food places started popping up all over the U.S. Let's think a little bit about how gender roles have been changed by food. Before, cooking was associated with women and always the duty of the wife to cook the meal. Now men are embracing more often. You have chefs like Alton Brown, Jamie Oliver, Wolfgang Puck. This has also elevated the role of cooking and the profession of a chef. Most people, back in the day, a cook was not a profession that was a sought-after career, but now celebrity chefs such as Anthony Bourdain and Andrew Zimmern, they travel around the world and tell tales about food. Even for me, personally, things have changed with food. When I was younger, I ate at home with my family. I didn't really go out too much, maybe once or twice a week. It was usually for a special occasion. Now fast forward to today, I rarely cook, surprisingly. I usually eat out probably every dinner and lunch at a restaurant. So I guess a question for you guys to think about is, when you were a kid, what did you eat and how have things changed?
Hi everyone, as Chris introduced me, I'm Courtney Toya, and a lot of the work that I do is in the eating disorder world, treating eating disorders and rebuilding one's relationship with food, and also exploring a sustainable food system, what that means for both people, the environment, and for businesses to also make a profit. And so today, we'll be talking about the past, present, and future. And if we think about the evolution of food and diet, I'm actually going to stand. Hopefully you can still see everything. The purpose of eating really changed. Okay, so if we think about back in the day, we had hunters and gatherers, right? So the purpose of eating was for survival. There was a need to sustain life. We ate because we had to, and because we needed to, otherwise we would starve to death, right? So there was very much a purpose in which people ate. Now, if we think about how we eat now, we eat for the experience, pleasure, and people back in the day did not care about the visual presentation of their part of the meat that they just hunted for, right? It was, they sought after the boar, they killed it, they got it, they brought it back, they cleaned it, chopped it up, grilled it up, and ate it. It didn't matter if it complemented their wine, or if it went with their starch side and it complemented all the flavors well, right? But that's something that we do now, right? So thinking about the past, it's very different, and there's been a lot of evolution throughout time. So speaking of which, there really is no ideal human diet, and I love this quote by Ann Gibbons. She wrote an article for the National Geographic called The Evolution of Diet, and how our ancestors ate and how that really impacts our own food preferences, our own ability to break down different foods, etc. And so she says that what makes one human is the ability to adapt to many habitats and combine different foods to create many healthy diets. Okay, and so one thing that I'd love for you to invite you to reflect on is, do you think there is one ideal diet and one ideal type of food that everyone should be eating? Right? Because we each have a different genetic makeup, different medical history, different preferences, accessibility to food, and resources. Now, like Brandon was saying, our interactions with food have changed over the years. So in the time that Brandon was describing, people were a lot more in touch with food. there was more emphasis of cooking and being in touch with our food in the home, knowing how to grow our food on the farm, and even learning how to prepare food at school. If you remember, how many of you remember taking like a home ec class? Raise your hand. There's actually quite a few of you. Right, so when I was in middle school, that was offered. However, it wasn't really about cooking. It was more of how to, just be a kind of a typical like housewife, like how it's depicted in the 50s. And so that was the reputation that it had. So really, there was a lot of emphasis, and it wasn't very cool to cook. However, it is now. If we also think about our family dynamic, right? A lot of times, traditionally, recipes and practices in the kitchen were passed down. However, a lot of the clients who I work with, students who I'm teaching, really feel very lost in the kitchen. And so that is something that has really kind of been lost throughout the generations. So as we are discussing all of this together, I invite you to really reflect on what motivates you to eat. So what are those influences? Right, because some people eat to live and to just get the right amount of nutrients and energies to get throughout their day and to be healthy. Whereas some people live to eat, right? Your whole vacation is planned around different food spots that you like to try. And there's a lot of enjoyment in that adventure. And I'd also love for you to think about if you think that there's an ideal human diet, okay? And if so, what is it? And if not, why not?
Right. All right, thank you, Brandon and Courtney. We definitely got the right speakers here tonight. I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow up that, but my job is to also talk about the food movement from the past, but not so much the past in terms of the last few decades, but really going way back in the past, into the ancient past, in terms of looking at the food movement millennia ago in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And when you look at the Bible, what you discover in the Old Testament is that food is central to the Israelites' experience. It's central as a metaphor, as a symbol, really for understanding the human experience, for understanding what it means to be made in the image of God. And so when you look at the Bible, what you find is that food is it's a symbol for evil. When man was first created in the Bible, in the garden, Adam and Eve, they fell into temptation, they disobeyed God, and they picked a piece of fruit from a tree that they weren't supposed to. And through that, it unleashed all of this sense of a rotten evil into humanity. And that was associated with the symbol of food, the introduction of evil into the human race. Food is also talked about in terms of longing, our longing for a home. Israel was searching for a home, and God promised through a man named Abraham that Israel would find a place to call their own. They would find a place of peace, and it was described through the metaphor of food. The promised land was described how? As a place of flowing milk and honey, a place of olives and pomegranates, a place where there was figs to eat, and bread would never be scarce. And so it was associated with the human soul's longing to find a home. As you keep going down, you find that food was also related to health issues. It's related to health issues today, but God had specifically said to his people, there are certain kosher dishes and certain unkosher dishes. And Israel was told that you can't eat certain types of animals like pigs or camels or rabbits. You can't eat certain things from the sea that don't have fins or scales like crab or lobster. And you can't eat certain types of birds like the falcon or the ostrich or the vulture. And what dietitians have realized is that one of the reasons why God gave his people those commands is to help guard against the spread of disease in a culture where there really wasn't a lot of medical care. So God was looking out for their health. Food was also a symbol of community. In ancient Israel, all Israel males were commanded to gather together for 3 feasts: the feast of Passover, of Pentecost, and Tabernacles. And when the men would come to gather for these feasts, it was a way of drawing the people together to experience community as well as worship. Food was also a symbol of healing. If in ancient times, if a person did something evil to you, or if you did something that angered God, an animal would have to die for that. They would actually have to sacrifice an animal, but they wouldn't just kill the animal. They'd actually take the animal after, cook it, and eat it. So it was a symbol of a remission of sin before God in the Bible. There's many other passages where food is talked about in terms of wisdom. It's seek after God's wisdom, and it's just like eating the sweetness of honey. And I want to read you this one verse, a couple verses from a man named Solomon, where he talks about food in terms of the enjoyment of life and finding God's will. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 24 through 26, Solomon writes, "There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to the one who pleases God." So the Bible talks about the importance of finding joy in your work, but also finding joy in what you eat as a gift from God. And so I just want to close by asking you a question, kind of just basic. We talk about food as a symbol, as a metaphor for the spiritual journey. What fruit would represent your journey with God? You know, as I was thinking just briefly of what fruit would represent my own journey, I chose an avocado. You know, an avocado is kind of dark and rough on the outside, but it's mostly soft on the inside. And it represents for a time in my life right now where I've gone through a lot of trials. People have passed away in my own family, and it kind of represents the outside of the avocado where it's been rough. But God, through it all, has kept my heart soft towards Him. So I just want to leave you with that question. If you had to choose one piece of food or fruit for your journey with God, whether you believe in Him or not, what would that be, and why? Thank you.
All right, thank you for the panelists. So as you can see, the night's going to move pretty quickly. Quick hitting. We're going to do it for round 2 and round 3 as well. So that was the hear portion of the first course, which was hearing about food in the past. Now the next part is the taste portion. So what we're going to do is, when I say go, everyone will stand up. Go.
It's like fresh, so it's going to be on the table like
It is
when you're finishing
right out of the oven. Right out of the oven. So when I say go, you'll stand up, go grab an avocado toast. It actually complements of solid here. And then what I'm going to have the speakers do is go to a different corner of the room. So maybe Brandy can go to that corner, or you can stay here, and maybe Courtney go over there to that corner. And again, it's sort of the format of a dinner party. So go over to a speaker of your choice, have a little discussion, have a discussion amongst yourselves. And then when we come back, I'll grab the mic in for about 10 minutes, and then we can go on with the second course, okay? So for those on Facebook Live, you might want to just kick it forward maybe about 10 minutes, and I'll come up. When you see my face, you can unpause it. All right, so we will stand up. Are we ready? Maybe not. Well, why don't we just go ahead and start with the breaking up into the groups then, and then as the food comes out, keep your eye over there on the table, and when it comes out, go grab one of the avocado toasts. All right? Thank you.
picky either, though.
You know what? You are?
I have a lot of dislikes in life.
All right, everybody. So before we move to the next course, what I would like you to do is go ahead and stand up, and we're going to grab the palate cleanser, or the pause part. So if you make your way over to the counter, there will be some cucumber-infused water shots for you to take. Okay, as you guys are finding your seats, I actually have a gift card. We're gonna do a quick giveaway. Solid Roasters, $10. So very nice, very nice. I was trying to think of a good question, and I like to make up the rules to my own game. So I'm gonna be the judge of who can give me the most exotic food that you've had in the last month. Okay? Most exotic. Exotic is the word. Anyone. Nobody had anything exotic? Everyone's sandwiches? Yes. Crickets. Ooh. Where was that? Okay. Grilled crickets. Okay. Do they have an A on the outside of their window? Is it like a C or something like that? Okay. All right, we're going to give it to him. Come on, get it. All right, so the next part, the second course of our night tonight is going to be the food movement in the present. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hear from each of our speakers.
Okay, so let's talk about how food has changed from the past to present. Food is definitely more of an obsession nowadays. People are taking pictures of their food. They have their own food Instagrams. They plan their day on what restaurant they're going to visit, and they plan vacation on what restaurants they want to try and what food they want to eat. People are using different hashtags, hashtag foodie, hashtag food porn. You've probably heard this before. Wait, don't take a picture yet. Wait, don't eat yet. Let me take a picture before you eat the food. There are now food festivals and even food museums. The Museum of Ice Cream just opened up in Los Angeles, and they've been sold out of tickets. I think they just reopened again, and they sold out till July 10th. Food is definitely a big thing in popular culture nowadays. For decades, people have looked up to actors, different athletes, and now chefs are celebrities. Celebrity chefs are becoming household names. You have Tyler Florence, Yada De Laurentiis, Wolfgang Puck, Emma Lagasse, Paula Deen. And one of my favorites, Ludo Lafave. He's owner of Trois Mec and Petit Trois in LA, and he won Best Restaurant in Los Angeles 2 years in a row. Even television food shows are starting to emerge even more. You have Top Chef, Chop, The Taste, Dine-In, Drive-Ins and Dives, Iron Chef, Cake Wars. There's also not only one but two food networks. The Cooking Channel and the Food Network, and that's not also including the other international food networks there are. There's been a lot of different food trends that have popped up recently. The food truck revolution started by Roy Choi and his Kogi trucks. You can see a lot of different food trucks all over towns and cities. I'm sure you guys have noticed that. Even the TV show, the Great Food Truck Race. Casual restaurants have also grown in popularity, which offer high quality ingredients and even healthier options than their fast food counterparts. They allow you to get your food in a quick and timely manner, and you can also dine in and kind of at your leisure. The build your own concept has taken off as well. Chipotle was one of the founders of the build your own, when you can customize your burrito, taco, or bowl. You can choose different proteins, vegetables, cheese, salsa, etc. Now there's build your own concepts such as pizza, poke. There's also Greek food, Korean, Chinese. Vegan and health concepts have also become popular. Restaurants are offering vegan and vegetarian options. Farm to table is something you've probably read about on a menu or even heard your server promote it. It's a social movement that promotes locally acquired food from local wineries, farms, fisheries. Home delivery services are also very popular nowadays. I'm sure you've heard of someone like Blue Apron, Gobble, HelloFresh, Plated, The Green Chef, Sunbasket, just to name a few. They provide food delivered fresh to your home and easy instructions to prepare a proportioned dish. No need to go to the market when you can have all your ingredients needed to cook for a one-person meal to a six-person meal delivered straight to your door. These services pride themselves on fresh quality ingredients, and you can choose healthy and vegan options as well. Themed restaurants have been around for a while. They come in all different varieties. They can range from specific ingredients they focus on, such as the Avocado Show in the Netherlands. It features avocados in every dish. There's also the Palms restaurant in Paris, France, that has over 120 different varieties of apples on their menu. Theme restaurants also can be, they can cover different specific themes and concepts, and sometimes the food can take a back seat. There's the Robot Restaurant in Japan, and Japan's kind of the king of those types of theme restaurants. They have Alcatraz ER, the Monster Cafe, Ninja Akasaka. Also, exciting thing is molecular gastronomy. Chefs are taking food to the next level with molecular gastronomy. It's essentially a subdivision of food science where chefs can transform both food physically and chemically. So chefs can create different tastes, textures, looks, and experiences. With molecular gastronomy, a skilled chef can push the envelope and create an ingredient or dish that someone has never tasted or experienced before. The options are endless and unlimited to what the future holds for us. I guess my question for you guys are, what are some foods you would like to see chefs do in the future?
All right, so now we're going to be focusing more on how we look at food now. And I have a video that will just do a short clip to give you just a look at our current generation and really how they see food.
Who knows what this is?
Potatoes.
Potato? So you think these are potatoes? Do you know what that is? Do you know? % of what we spend on healthcare, as I said earlier, is on obesity, and it's going to double. We're not teaching our kids There's no statutory right to teach kids about food, elementary or secondary school, okay? We don't teach kids about food, right? And this is a little clip from an elementary school, which is very common in England. Who knows what this is?
Potatoes.
Potato? So you think these are potatoes? Do you know what that is? Do you know what that is?
Broccoli.
What about this? That good old friend. Do you know what this is, honey?
Celery.
No. What do you think it is, darling?
Onion.
Onion, no. Immediately you get a really clear sense of, do the kids know anything about where food comes from? Who knows what that is?
Pear.
What do you think this is?
I don't know.
If the kids don't know what stuff is, then they will never eat it. Normal. England and America.
So in that video, we just got a clip of kids, and the National School Lunch Program has gotten a lot of flack for not providing fruits and vegetables to students, okay? And one of the biggest problems is education, right? We can't force kids to choose to eat fruits and vegetables that they have no idea what that is. An eggplant looks very foreign. Like if you didn't know what an eggplant was, it'd be hard to want to just start to eat it. It has an interesting texture that's a little weird for kids, even for adults sometimes. And so really the moral of that video is that we are really losing touch with our food. And specifically, our society is really lacking the education to be able to distinguish different foods, different types of produce, and also how to grow these foods. We're seeing that if we're not in the kitchen cooking, right, and we expect to see a prepared meal, right? If you think about wasabi, when I think of wasabi, I think of it as this green paste in this little cup that I get at a sushi restaurant. But in reality, it's a root. However, I would not be able to recognize that root. I would only recognize it in its packaged form, right? Because I'm not in touch with where wasabi root is grown. I'm not around a farm. I don't look into that, right? So I only recognize it in a certain type of form. Now, if I had never been to a sushi restaurant and someone told me to eat this green paste, and I had no idea what that was, and then I put it in my mouth like a full spoonful, it'd be really alarming, right? Because we're not necessarily accustomed to that if we've never been exposed to it or been educated on it. Now, another part of preparing our food is knowing how to use it. Now, food utilization is a big pillar of food security, right? So if we are saying, let's cook more at home and let's, purchase fresh ingredients and prepare it. If you don't know how to do that or what these different foods are, it's going to be really hard to encourage someone to cook for themselves. A lot of the students that I teach, clients that I have, are very hesitant in the kitchen because they don't know what to do. They feel very lost. How do you actually chop up celery? How do you chop up meat? How do you cook it to its proper temperature? There's a food blog post, actually, that promoted medium rare chicken because it was so moist and so tender, and it was like this newfound thing. When in reality, that is a big risk for foodborne illness, right? We know poultry needs to be cooked all the way through. But we're moving away from understanding our food supply. Now, we also have unrealistic expectations from food. If you actually want to recall the last time you were at a supermarket and you go to the produce section, particularly the apples, they are all so uniform. They are pristine. You can barely find an apple with a dent on it or dirt on it. When in reality, dirt should be on apples because it's grown outside, right? But we don't see that. And so we've become accustomed to seeking out perfect produce. And if it has a dent, we don't buy it, right? But in reality, it could have just fallen from the tree and it has a little bit of a dent. And it could still taste fantastic. As a result, farmers are actually losing a lot of money because supermarkets will only purchase perfectly shaped fruit. So the ugly fruit that they are able to grow is not purchased by supermarkets because consumers will avoid it. We've also become very used to having consistent availability of fresh produce regardless of the season or the time of year. In addition to that, with places like Sprouts, they've done a great thing with making produce very affordable. However, there are a lot of reasons why certain foods are very affordable. At the same time, if we expect high quality produce to be cheap, someone is not getting paid, right? Because the amount of time, labor, and effort that goes into growing food, who is not getting paid for their time producing this food for us, right? So it's the expectations that we have that are really unrealistic for the reality of growing food. Now these pictures here are fun because this eggplant, lemon, and orange are very weird looking, however, internally just as edible. We have to get over the fact that it looks like an oddly shaped thing, right? However, carrots that are like double carrots that are like holding hands is like a symbol of like, oh, that's so cute, right? Like they're holding hands, that's really cool. But would you eat it? I don't know. How many of you would eat that? Okay, well, great. I'm so glad I'm in a room of people who are open to ugly produce because it's really the same thing. It just looks different. Now, this is another reason why food is thrown away, not just at the levels that I'm talking about earlier, but also within food service operations and at grocery stores already. And we're seeing that the wasted food is really edible food. It's not really showing that there's signs of spoilage. I'm not talking about eating moldy strawberries. I'm talking about strawberries that just look a little deformed. Now, ironically, we spend so much money on resources that are for producing this food, and yet 30 to 50% of it is just thrown away. So we're growing all this food, all this effort, we're demanding water, energy, labor, and it's just going straight to the trash. So managing our resources is really a great way to help alleviate food insecurity, which is why it's an issue that's really important to talk about. Now, these three are the groups that are wasted the most. So we have meat, fish, and poultry, fruits and vegetables, and then dairy products. Now, again, ironically, these are the food groups where the food insecure are missing the most. The nutrients in these foods are the things that they are lacking. And so unemployment really is the single greatest factor in whether someone can be food secure or not. And so it's important to realize that there are so many resources out there for people in need, and we can really be distributing our food in a better way, but it's not yet happening. So food waste really is the largest component of municipal waste. And it's really not that there's a shortage of food. There's been talk of how by 2050, we're going to have 9 billion people in the world. And people are concerned about how we're going to feed all of these people. Now, my question for you to think about is it a matter of not having enough food, or is the food just not getting to the right people? And is it not distributed appropriately? Now, annually, about 1,400 calories per person is going to a landfill instead of nourishing an individual. Now, I'm not going to get into how many calories everyone should be eating, but we do know that that could be a very sufficient amount for somebody. So discussion, just to get your minds thinking about things, if I haven't gotten there already with you. What are some ways to become more connected to our food and our food supply? Where do you see food waste happening? Is it happening in your own home? It happens with everybody. There's no shame with that. It happens. And then what can we do about just the misallocation of resources?
All right, thank Thank you guys. I think I learned more about food right now than I have ever before, and those pictures made me look really hungry, feel hungry. I'm going to be talking about the spiritual angle of food in the present. And have you noticed that people talk about food today in spiritual terms? I was looking on my Instagram, and just in the past 2 days, you know, whether you're on social media, a lot of times people post pictures of food or food-related things. And I just couldn't help thinking how when people talk and post pictures about food, they often talk about it how we used to talk about spirituality. One of the posts I was looking at said, quote, "Love at first bite, I'll be back for you." And she was talking about a piece of pizza, crossing the country to go eat a piece of pizza because she loved it so much. Another post I was looking at said, "My leg should heal, but if it doesn't heal, I'll always have ice cream." And she's equating ice cream, tongue-in-cheek, with healing. And then my favorite from a couple days ago, I was looking at someone had posted a picture and he was holding a box and he was hugging it. And the caption read, "Christmas is getting my new $2,700 coffee grinder." And he says, just like Christmas, coffee is now equated with the birth of our Savior. And we talk about food as a type of savior to us. We talk about food in terms of developing community. I mean, we have these groups: localvore, omnivore, pescatarian, paleo, organic, vegetarian, raw. They're almost like different denominations. We talk about food in terms of how people used to talk about righteousness. We use food as a way of feeling like our body and our mind and our soul are cleansed. We put food on our faces to beautify ourselves. We use food to express our creativity. We see food as a force for good in the world, to alleviate poverty, to help the environment. Even at a coffee shop, we talk in terms of fair trade and the ethics of that. And we start to talk about food in righteousness terms. We also talk about food in terms of evil today. You know, we think of these GMO corporations that a lot of people just want to bring down, these evil empires that they perceive as. We talk about food in terms of food porn. That used to be called lust. We talk about food in terms of being a food snob. That's pride. We talk about supersizing our portions, gluttony. And so many people were interested that we don't want food to poison our bodies. And one of the things I ask is, are we as concerned that something in terms of our character could be poisoning our soul? You know, do you ever look around in pop culture and ask yourself the question, you ever notice why vampires and zombies are so popular in our pop culture? You know, you have shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Twilight, True Blood, The Vampire Diaries. We watch movies like World War Z. We watch television shows like The Walking Dead. You ever ask yourself why vampires, why zombies are so popular in our pop culture? You know, why not the Abominable Snowman? Why not Bigfoot? You know, we tried to reboot Godzilla and King Kong, really didn't work. But there's something about vampires, there's something about zombies that has really stuck in our cultural ethos. Why is that? I think it's because vampires look for life in the blood, and zombies look for life in the flesh. And there is something about our culture that expresses a need that we have in the human soul that's being played out in pop culture. That the icons, these villains, these vampires and zombies that we hold up so obsessively, are cultural pop icons that are searching for life in food and searching for life in drink. Why have our conversations about food been replacing our conversations about spirituality in our culture? You know, I wonder if our fascination as a culture with cleaning our bodies and cleansing our bodies through food, I wonder if our fascination with cleansing our souls through food has a little bit to do with the sense that we just feel dirty on the inside. And we'll do anything we can, even through food, to cleanse ourselves. I wonder if there's a hunger for God in our culture that is in part being expressed through our obsession with the food movement. There's a lot of good things to the food movement, like these speakers are talking about, right? But I just have to wonder, is there some spiritual angle to this that goes to the core of the human soul? You know, some of you are here, and you're listening to what I'm saying, and you're saying, you know, I reject religion. I reject any kind of imposed morality that can be put upon my life. And if that's you, the good news is that Jesus said the same thing. Jesus did not come to establish a religion. He didn't come to impose primarily a code of ethical teachings on humanity. I wanted you to hear something Jesus said in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, verse 35. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus said he's the bread of life, and if you come to him, you will never hunger. He said if you believe in him, you will never thirst. Not come to a religion, not come to a code of ethical morality, but to come to him. And I think one of the things that really struck me was when I realized that Jesus is someone who's alive. He's actually someone that your soul consumes. He's someone who feeds your thirsty soul, who feeds your hungry spirit. And that is much different than looking at him as merely trying to be a good person in society. And so I just want to leave you with the question of, have you ever thought about Jesus as someone who can feed your soul? Have you ever thought about Jesus as someone who can quench the thirst of your spirit? You know how we all get, right? When we're famished and we're hungry for food, and how irritable we become, and how just kind of driven we are to just put the food into our mouth because our bodies are so craving it. I wonder if in our culture the same thing is happening spiritually, where people are so hungering after God that they're almost grabbing after anything that they can hope will feed the thirst and the hunger of their soul. So think about that. I want to pose that question to you guys.
All right, so we will move into the taste portion of the second course. Now what we're going to do for this one is I'm going to ask everyone to stand up when I'm done, and you're going to go over there and grab a plate of the second course, and then you're going to come back and sit down right where you are, and we're going to have the panelists stay up here, and we're going to have an open discussion, a large group discussion between us as a group and the three of them up here. I want to introduce the culinary creations that our church did come up with. I think Lorraine has a little bit of a smirk over there. I'm gonna try to pronounce these correct. Okay, so the first one is the Deconstructed Taco Now Year 2025. And you can see on the back of your program a little bit of a description of what that is. And the second one is the Natto Roboto Senso Bite Reimagined. And then along with that, you're gonna get the palate cleanser on the same plate as well. That is a lemon mint. Okay, so why does everyone go ahead and stand up? Make a line over there and grab your plate, and then come back and sit down. We'll join the panelists again.
Want some water, Esther? I despise it. Not hiding.
So for those on Facebook Live, this is what the plate looks like. Is it focusing right now? It's in the picture? Okay, so this cantaloupe one right here is a deconstructed taco, and then the natto robato is the one on the bottom. There you go, thank you. And then, what is this? The lemon mint is the one in the little cup.
Did it spill?
All right, we're gonna come back. Okay, so this is your chance to ask questions to our panelists, and I'm just going to take it from the crowd. I'll sort of moderate this portion of everything. Does anyone have any questions that they're dying to ask any of our panelists here? Yes. Okay, so the question is on GMOs. Okay, what is your opinion on it? Does it have any bearing to us as lay people? Who wants to go for that one?
So GMOs are a hot buzz topic. They stand for genetically modified organisms. I'm not an expert in it. I just want to give you a disclaimer. I do, though, want to challenge or kind of showcase the different perspectives that we have. Scientifically, there really is not a lot of evidence that shows that they are harmful. We don't have a lot of research that really indicates that conclusively. And so I do have to say that based on, you know, the course that I teach, we do see, though, that genetically modified organisms can play a crucial role in food accessibility for people around the world. So it really started as with good intention to create a crop that is drought resistant. So with kind of a lot of the climate that has been changing and the dynamic, there have been areas, you know, around the world who are not receiving rain for long spells of time. Okay, and so the crop that they would grow, like they couldn't grow any crop. Like their rice crop was not really harvesting much because it couldn't sustain itself. So scientists then were trying to come up with a way for them to grow drought-resistant rice. And so in that situation, the intent was to help humans in that way. And it was successful, and they were able to help that community. Right? Now that's not, we can't apply that to every single big box retailer and every single corporation who is using GMOs to create really mass-produced, high-volume food at a cheap price. So there is a role for GMOs to play in the world. And they're not as bad and evil as everyone says that they are. However, there's just a lot of inconclusive evidence, and so I think the uncertainty of the effect of GMOs long term is what scares people, because we just don't know the long term effects of that. Yeah, that's pretty much a good way to kind of challenge the popular belief that, oh, GMOs are bad. Like, not necessarily. They can play a role. However, we are also kind of messing with how nature and God intended for food to be grown. And so there is that piece as well, that us as a society, we are demanding a lot of food. And how are people going to produce that amount of food the natural way when we have so many people demanding food immediately? Supermarkets need to be stocked all the time. So it's a very big, there's a lot of factors that go into it. But just to give you some perspective on how GMOs can play a role, but that intention has not been necessarily pure and well-intended all the way through. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Part of the reason I brought it up about the GMOs was, I think it was this year that I think the FDA approved taking a nutrient out of the apples, so the apples won't turn brown anymore. And so I don't know how that's going to affect our body, because you know, everything we eat has bacteria, chemicals in it that provides for our body. And if we're taking these things out, it's going to affect them.
So for the people on Facebook Live who didn't hear that question, the guest was commenting on some FDA approvals of taking a nutrient out of the apple, genetically modifying it so that it won't brown as quickly, and he has some concerns regarding that.
So the enzymatic browning that happens with oxidation is pretty much when you cut the apple and it's exposed to oxygen, it will start to turn brown, and that deters people from eating it. It could sit out for 3 minutes and it turns brown, and it looks kind of gross. So to some people, like it looks weird. Now, based on what we've seen in the research, mass amounts of pesticides and chemicals do have an effect on the body's development, on our health. However, taking a nutrient out of an apple, like I don't know exactly what, do you know exactly what that nutrient is, or is it just adjusting the composition of the apple?
There's like conflicting websites with different,
Yeah.
like some of them were saying like, one of them say like B something, like B12, something like that. I don't know.
B12 isn't in that.
Yeah, and there's a different one that was saying different things. I don't know.
Yeah.
All the websites are conflicting, so I'm trying to find out more facts about it.
Sure. The thing with adjusting the composition of an apple, they're not necessarily using, well, I can't really answer that. I think I would say, though, that your body does know what to do with the food that you're digesting. Now, nutrient value in apples, whether it's GMO, it's genetically modified or not, the nutrient value of it will differ, and that depends on the soil content in which it was grown. Now, you could have an organic apple, a conventionally grown apple, and a non-certified organic apple grown by someone who practices beyond organic farming, like biodynamic farming, right? The nutrient value of those apples can differ across the board, not just because one is genetically modified, but the nutrients that we get from our fruits and vegetables is actually from the soil in which it's grown. And so if we are putting in chemicals and fertilizers into the soil, that is what the produce is using as nutrients. Like it gets its energy and fuel, like we do from food, from the soil. And so it's really more about what we're spraying on top of it and what we're using to treat the soil. And so if we're using compost, right, does anyone know what compost is? Okay, so if we're using compost to fertilize our soil, we're putting those nutrients back in. And that's what that apple crop is going to take from the soil. So I would be more concerned about what they're spraying on top versus the crop itself, because that's where we see, the nutrients being sourced from is the soil. Now, mass-produced apples that are, we just want to get high volume, and they're depleting the soil over and over again. Like if you think about crop rotation, is anyone like a farmer in here, or like they garden and grow food? Okay. So it takes time for the soil to replenish itself. That's why we have seasons, and that's why we have crop rotations. And if we are focused on producing a mass amount of food, you will and for profit as well, to stay afloat business-wise, you're going to try to get as much volume out as possible, right? So we mass produce these apples. Now, as a result, we are not allowing the soil to replenish itself. So really, you're growing a bunch of apples, but the nutrients that they get from it are going to be less and less and less. Sorry to run on about that.
Any other questions? I have a question for Brandon. I think everyone's dying to know what the best thing you've eaten, and if there's any diamonds in the rough around this area that you could recommend.
I've eaten a lot of really good food. One of the best dishes I think I've had was from Ludo Lafar's pop-up restaurant. It was called Ludo Bites, and then he did a potato mousseline with chorizo and then a soft quail leg under it. And then surprisingly, I was reading Jonathan Gold. He's a LA food writer. I was reading one of his articles, and then he actually rated that as one of the top 3 dishes of the year. So it was a pretty amazing dish. We ate it, and then instantly we ordered another order of it because it was so good. As far as diamond in the rough restaurants, I focus more in Orange County, but one of my favorite restaurants in LA is the Bazaar by Jose Andres. He's considered one of the godfathers of molecular gastronomy. He has a lot of amazing stuff there. It's at the SLS Hotel. There's a sushi restaurant that's one of my favorite spots in Orange called Oshima that has a really good omakase. and as far as quality-wise, I think it stands up to like a lot of the LA sushi restaurants, but the price is much lower. There's a new restaurant in downtown Santa Ana called Mix Mix. It's they mix French and Filipino food, and it's pretty good. I think Orange Coast Magazine rated it the #1 or restaurant of the year in Orange County. So there's a few. If you go to my website, ocfoodlist.com, I have a list of the top 30 restaurants in Orange County that you guys can check out.
And then a question for Pastor Chris. How can we use food to expand God's kingdom? Or do you have any stories where you've seen food to actually be a positive thing rather than an idolatrous thing?
Do I have any stories? Yes, absolutely. My wife, Lorraine, has done work in helping homeless food missions across the country raise funds. She's done work off and on for about 15 years. And I've done some work with the Union Rescue Mission, different missions around the country. And I've probably heard about 1,500 stories. Sorry if there's feedback there. 1,500 stories over the past 8 years of people who have had their lives changed through these Christian homeless missions across the country. And one of the things that you find that is consistent about how people who get off the street and come to the mission, get into a program, and have their life changed, not only just spiritually, but medically, legally, getting a job, and so forth. One of the catalysts behind that is the first meal that they're offered. That the missions give this meal to them. It's almost an act of grace, and they continue to feed them, clothe them, house them. And I just feel like that's a really good use that I've seen up front of how being graceful to people, giving them just a simple meal, has really blessed them and opened them up to conversations, opened them up to connect with people at the mission. As far as the other part, I would just say that, the Bible talks about food in also very positive ways. It talks about, we talked about how Solomon said you can enjoy your work, you can enjoy your food that God has given to you. But I also think about how the Apostle James, the Apostle John, they talk about how food and your material goods can be used to express the love of God. It can be used to help the poor around you. And as you use what you've been blessed with materially, part of which is food, it shows that you are expanding God's kingdom. You're sharing God's love with other people. So I think food brings people together. I'll just say this one last thing is there have been a lot of secular studies that have shown that, and I don't know how they're able to connect this, but they talk everything about from teenage delinquency to crime to drugs, and a lot of the studies I've seen have basically said that one of the best things that you can do as a parent for your family is to simply just sit down and eat a meal at the dinner table with your children, rather than, hey, just go get fast food, or you eat at one point and I'll eat at another point. But actually the physical act of a family coming together, or two spouses coming together and say, let's eat a meal and sit together without our phones for 30 minutes and let's just talk, has tremendous upside to the health and of families. So a lot of good things there.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to the dessert, which is the third course here. But before we do that, I have another gift card from Solid. So I'm going to ask for your participation again. I was trying to, again, think of a good question. And the one that I came up with is, who has waited the longest for a meal? Yes. What was yours? Like in line at a restaurant. I mean, yes, and a line. Like there's a line of people because it's a very famous or big restaurant. Anyone? 2.5 hours? Who said that one? Phil, where was that one for?
Snooze in San Diego.
What is it called?
Snooze.
Snooze, okay, in San Diego. Anyone can beat 2.5?
Not in San Diego. It was in Denver.
Denver,
Yeah.
okay. Anyone can beat 2.5, yes. 5 or 6 hours for Franklin Barbecue in Austin. Anyone can beat that? How about even like on a reservation or a wait list? No? No one? Okay, this seems a little bit rigged. I'm gonna give it to Phil. Okay, we'll move to the desserts. So now we've looked at food in the past, we've looked at food in the present, and now we turn it to the future. So I'll hand it over to the speakers.
Okay, so our last segment is the dessert portion. We're talking about what the future holds for food. Some experts predict that meat could become a luxury item, as it once was in the past. By mid-century, meat could even become too expensive to eat for the poor. They also say that in 2050 our diet could consist less around meat and more around bugs. I'm sure everyone would think that's very delicious. Companies are also working on producing plant-based alternatives. One American company is producing a plant-based alternative to egg yolk. There's going to be a large reliance on genetic engineering to feed a hungry world. Some instances could be lab-grown meat. Also think about how specific food can be in the future. There might be food tailored specifically for populations, even elderly, the young, man, women. And then food is going to be more expensive in the future, but customized for each of us. You can imagine 3D printed food, a custom printed food for your liking and your dietary specifications. Another low-tech solution is algae. Algae contains more calcium, protein, iron, vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants than any other fruit or vegetable. Science fiction movies might not be far off as well. Imagine taking a pill that could basically give you your whole meal in one pill for the day. Food in the future could also be less about taste and more about surviving and just providing the daily nutrients for each day. There are also many new restaurant trends that you could see in the future. Automation is going to be a big thing. You have probably seen in a restaurant where you can order from an iPad or a tablet. Also, there's probably going to be more restaurants that use technology to reduce the wait staff, and also servers with minimum wage going up, and also the increasing cost of benefits. The profit margins are getting a little thinner for restaurants. So more restaurants are going to be using technology and analytics to record what your preferences are and have them ready for you when you walk through the door with your smartphone. Also, you can imagine sitting at a smart table where you will have the menu on the smart table. Also, it's going to automatically let you order from your seat and have your food delivered directly to you. Of course, it's going to be assembled by a robot. Kitchen appliances that mimic recipes of famous chefs, and when done, you can automatically pay with your smartphone and leave and interact, and you don't have to even wait for your server. These are a lot of the different things that you can expect from restaurants in the future. So my question to you guys are, what are some things you can look forward to in the future, and then what are also some things that you might not look forward to in the future for food?
So for the future of food and our food supply, there are things that we can do. So we've talked about how we really need to reallocate our resources and really distribute them appropriately. And one thing that typically food service operations, restaurants, supermarkets are very concerned about is, sure, maybe there's some leftover food, but what if I donate it and someone gets sick and then they sue us? Like, I don't want to be liable for that, right? How many people have heard that? Yeah, it's very commonly heard. At the same time, there's actually the federal Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act. There's also been a Food Recovery Act of 2015, but we know that this was actually established to encourage people to donate their leftover food to different social service agencies. And there is a level of protection there for the food service operation, that it's really only gross negligence that is a form of liability. So if you know that you've left your sushi out for 6 hours at a buffet and you still donate it, like, that's gross negligence. You know that fish has been out for a very long time in the temperature danger zone that increases our risk for foodborne illness, and you still donate it, right? So that's where there would be some liability. But that's not necessarily the case, especially if your food service operation has everything in place for proper temperature storage, reheating, etc. It is doable to donate your food instead. Now, Food Finders here in Signal Hill is an organization that really seeks to bridge the gap between business owners, consumers, restaurants, and the food insecure. So they've developed a niche market where food service operations can notify food finders and say, I have a bunch of leftover food. The restaurant does not have to worry about who is going to transport that food to the various agencies, right? Food finders will send a volunteer that same day to pick up that food, and they will distribute it to local agencies. And those agencies will feed the impoverished and hungry. So they actually collect excess food from not only restaurants and bakeries, but from supermarkets like Trader Joe's and other farmers markets too, and food service operations. So it's really bridging that gap, and it's been really, really effective. Over 160 agencies are receiving donations regularly. So my work at Cal State Long Beach is really involved in the sustainability efforts. And so the class that I teach has a service learning component, and my students get to learn hands-on how to grow their own food. So this garden box here on your left, my right, is on campus. And this is the ASI campus garden box for my class. And this was a picture of their crop from the fall. And so students would go there for 20 hours a semester and learn how to grow their own food. And this was done by students. And so this food was being used for this banquet that they would put on at the end of the year. They would be donating this food to our beach pantry, which is a food pantry for students who are food insecure, so they can go and receive food assistance. And to have fresh produce like this that's grown beyond organically accessible is wonderful. Now, another effort that we had just piloted was the Farm to Student Produce at the Plaza event. Now, I partnered up with Food Forward, which is a nonprofit organization who goes to various farmers markets and will glean all the excess produce. So anything that the farmers didn't sell, and maybe it's Sunday and there's not going to be another market to sell at for the rest of the week, or at least for the next few days, they will donate that food to Food Forward and get a tax break, right, tax deduction, and that food goes directly to different social service agencies. So we literally were able to receive 160 pounds of fresh produce from the Long Beach Farmers Market on Sundays at the marina. And that food was linked directly to students. So we displayed it out like this, and we just had students come by and they could just take whatever produce they wanted. And there was a lot of education on the ugly fruit piece. I got to show them, like, smell it. You can smell the aroma coming from the grapefruit. Maybe a little dirty, maybe a little, there's like some specks on it, but look how fragrant this is. And there's a lot of education there, and it's increasing access of fresh produce to students. So those are some of the efforts that are being done at Cal State Long Beach, and even just in the Long Beach community as well. My question for you is, what can we do about the future of our food supply, knowing how many people there are to feed and knowing how many hungry people there are in our own communities?
I guess my closing word to us here tonight would be, when I think about the future of the food movement, I actually think about the way forward future of the food movement. And when I say the future of the food movement, I'm talking about heaven. Now, heaven is talked about in food language. The Bible says in the book of Revelation that heaven is described as a place where there are 12 types of fruit from the tree of life. It talks about heaven as a big banqueting table called the marriage supper of the Lamb of Jesus Christ. In fact, one of the things that was so striking to the people who were reading the Bible in ancient times was when heaven was talked about simply as a place where you could have enough food to eat, and that food was delicious, and that was their vision of the afterlife and in heaven. And I just want to read to you one story that Jesus told where he talked about heaven as a banqueting table and the choices that we make related to our spiritual futures. This is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14. And Jesus told this story. He said, "A man once gave a great banquet and invited many people to come to it. And at that time, for the banquet to start, he sent his servant to say to those who had been invited already, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I have bought a field, and I must go out and see it. Please have me excused.' And another said, 'I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I go to examine them. Please have me excused.' And another said, 'I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come.'" That's actually a good reason not to come to a banquet, actually, but he actually could have come in reality. So the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, 'Go out quickly to the streets and lanes of the city, and bring in the poor, and the crippled, and the blind, and the lame.' And the servant said, 'Sir, what you have commanded has been done, and still there is room.' And the master said to the servant, 'Go out to the highways and the hedges, and compel people to come in, that my house may be filled. For I tell you that none of the men who were invited shall taste my banquet.'" Now there's a lot in this story, but I just want to point out a few things. This man had held a banquet. He invited all of these guests to come to his banquet. And when the time for the banquet came, this big celebration where they could all be together, there were several people who excused themselves from coming to the banquet. They basically ignored the host of the banquet and said, "I'm just going to go do my own thing. I'm too busy. I got too many things going on. I just, maybe another time." And they declined the invitation. And so when the master came back, as you guys were hearing the story, he said, "You know what? If these people don't want to come, I will take the poor and the lame and the beggar." I find great hope in that, in the sense that God's kingdom is open to the broken, to those who are in need of healing, to the poor in spirit, and that's me. And then he said, as those people started to come into his banquet, he said, it's not filled yet, they said to him. So he says, "Go out and invite some other people, the people on the edges of the city." And that's us as well, the people on the outside. And then the master concluded the parable by saying, those original people that were invited to the banquet, they won't be able to come in the end. And this parable, to me, as I close, is both encouraging and it's also a very sobering warning to me as I think about the future of the food movement in heaven. It's encouraging because I think it reminds me that God's kingdom is big enough for everyone who wants to be part of it. And the invitation that's given to everyone by the Master is the invitation that Jesus Christ gives to us through his life and his death and his resurrection, that anyone who would follow after him as Lord and Savior may participate in that banquet in heaven. But it's also a sobering tale to me, because it reminds me that while the invitation goes out to people, not everyone will receive it. Sometimes we feel we're too busy or don't want to accept it. And how tragic it would be if at the future of the ultimate food movement we come to the place where we find out that we made no time for the host that invited us to his kingdom, and so we're left out ultimately of the banquet table that he offers to everyone in heaven. And so let's not let that be us, you guys. I want to encourage you to seek out the Lord, and if you have any questions along that journey, come talk to us. We'll pray for you. We'll help you in any way we can. So thank you guys again for having us tonight. God bless you. I think Matt's going to come on up and say a few words.
not quite done yet. We have the dessert food, which will be a donut and hot chocolates, and it's ready to go over on the table. So when you're ready, go ahead and stand up, grab the plate, and we're going to do this one, the talking, or I guess it's the talking part, in small group discussions. So groups of 3 or 4. Everyone's sort of sanctioned off right now in groups of 3 or 4 already. Try to go to a new group so you can discuss what you think about the donut and the hot chocolate. Okay, ready, go. All right, we'll come back real quick and then we'll close. Okay, so yeah, pretty much, that's going to be the end of our night. I'm going to hand it over to Pastor Chris real quick, and he's going to say some final words.
Okay, let's thank the panelists here for coming out tonight. You did a great job. I know I learned a lot. I'm definitely a lot more hungry. And thank you guys for coming out. Hope you guys had a good time. And just a short reminder. Just a short reminder, our next citizen event will be here at Solid Coffee Roasters on June 1st. I think that's a Thursday night in a couple weeks at 7 o'clock. And the topic will be faith and the workplace. Specifically, how do you live out your faith in God in the workplace that you find yourself in? So we're going to have a really good panel. We're going to have a businessman. We're going to have an artist. We're going to have someone who works in politics. We're going to have someone who has fought in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. And they're going to talk about how their faith has affected them in the workplace or different areas of their work. So it's going to be really good. June 1st, 7 o'clock here at Solid Coffee Roasters. You can check out more information on citybible.church/citizen. And finally, if you guys are free on Sundays at 4 p.m., we meet for worship for our church service just down the street on the border of Sritas and Artesia. You can check out more on the website. We'd like to invite you to come join us on a Sunday, 4 o'clock, if you're free in the area. So I think we have some gifts for the panelists. That's The Best Food Writing by Holly Hughes. It's a collection of some of the best food articles that have appeared over, I guess on this one, 2016. I've been reading that book for about 5 or 6 years, different years, so it's really, really cool. And in your bag is a cacao bean with cocoa beans, I think, in the middle. It's from Argentina, and so if you shake it, it's a little bit of beans there. So those are gifts for our panelists. Thank you again, Brandon. Thank you again, Courtney, for joining us here tonight. So God bless you guys, and thanks for coming. Enjoy the rest of the evening.